Good Tuesday, everyone. Welcome to the Volquest.com podcast with Rob Lewis, Jesse Simonton, and Austin Price. Brent Hubbs, glad to have you along with us on this Tuesday. Plenty to get to. Jeremy Pruitt did not come out and say it's on to South Carolina like Bill Belichick, but made it clear he was trying to move on to South Carolina. But there's some things and loose ends to tie up, certainly, from Tennessee's play in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and the loss there for the Volunteers. Let's start first with just your overall thoughts of Tennessee's play, just their effort. We're obviously going to dive into some specifics, but your takeaway from seeing Tennessee against what was declared the number one team in the country. I think we can all debate whether or not they're the number one team. They're not the number one team without Tua at the quarterback position. But your takeaways from just Tennessee's performance after rewatching it, I won't say sleeping, but having some hours to take a look at it, Austin.
Yeah, I thought Tennessee played, as well as they've played this year in spurts. Saturday they fought hard, and defensively, up front, it was a group I left for dead 6 weeks ago, and I don't even know. Actually, I probably had them buried more than I did leaving for dead. And they've manufactured themselves into a solid little blue collar group. Now they're not world beaters, but they're also not necessarily a liability right now either.
They punch back. Yeah. That's for the whole team. Alabama scored on 3 of the 4 possessions that Tua was in, and the other one was the goal line interception. But Tennessee, despite a disastrous start, you go 3 and out, you have the 2 miscues on special teams, then Maurer has the tip, goes for an interception. They weren't afraid, and that's something that I don't think you could say about a lot of Tennessee teams recently, and definitely over the course of this 13-game losing streak against Alabama. They weren't afraid. They punched back, and right now I think, I was talking to somebody else about this yesterday. I think just kind of a word that I would use to kind of describe these Vols is they're feisty. Now, can they turn that feistiness into wins? I think that's the next step.
You can go back to the Georgia State game for one thing and look at how much better they are. It's night and day. But even more dramatic for me is I go back to the end of last year when I think you can argue that they laid down against Missouri and Vanderbilt. That was not that is not the identity of this team now. Coming out of Saturday's game, they weren't very good against Georgia late in that game. But I wouldn't say they were feisty like Jesse said. But I thought you really saw that on Saturday. I thought you saw a level of physicality that I hadn't seen from them before on the road against the number one team in the country. And Jeremy mentioned it today. There was adversity. There were some bad calls early. Tua was hot early. And Tennessee made some plays and hung around and looked like they belonged on the field with the number one team in the country.
So how does this team, who by my account was uncompetitive at Florida, I didn't think they competed. I didn't think they were competitive against Florida a month ago. How in a month have they become a team that is feisty, a team that's got some physical? Is that just essentially four weeks of development, that they've really developed that much in 4 weeks? Is it, they're trying to be a little more stubborn, trying to run the football and let the offensive line grow a little bit? Is it all Brian Maurer? What is it about this team that went from not having a pulse in Gainesville, Florida, to playing Georgia to the lead basically at the end of the first half, up until the final couple minutes, beating Mississippi State, and being competitive Saturday night in Tuscaloosa?
Well, I do think that it all seemed to have started with the bye week, and they made some personnel changes. Some were big, like deciding that we're going to switch up who's going to take the lion's share of reps at quarterbacks. Now, obviously, Maurer has not survived lasting all 3 starts. But others were small in the decisions like, hey, Matthew Butler and Darrell Middleton are going to play a lot more on the defensive line than they played the first couple weeks of the season. We're going to really lean on, he's going to make some mistakes, but Quavaris Crouch is going to play more. Kenneth George has now been involved even more the last couple weeks. And I think it cannot be undersold the fact that the staff did not have a good start. One of them, the best staff in America, deemed by Jeremy Pruitt, did not have a good start to the season, but they have absolutely coached their tails off, I think, the last 3 games. Now, it's come up with two losses and a W, But in terms of game planning, scheme, putting their players in the best position to succeed, I think they've done yeoman's work compared to how the season started, and not just the Georgia State game.
Well, and I think to me the biggest thing that jumps out of that is Jim Chaney committing to running the football the last 3 weeks. Something I think he was pretty much against doing in the Florida game. I didn't think they committed to trying to run the football in the Florida game at all, but they've shown a commitment to do it. And look, he's been rewarded by that with an offensive line that's gotten better. But to me, for as much as Brian Maurer has changed things, and he has, okay, when they're in there, they're much more dynamic. I think we all agree that they can throw it with more accuracy. They can do things. But to me, the biggest change in the offense is the fact they can line up and have some success running the football.
Yeah, and
you've talked about it, Rob. The average yards per carry last year, how woeful it was. It's over 4 yards a carry by running backs the last 2 ball games.
Yeah, and if you actually take out sacks last year, the yards per carry are a little bit closer. The difference is Tennessee's just not getting the negative plays.
Only had 2 at all.
Yeah, and that's been the key, is that they're not just, it's not over the court. They're just not getting tackled in the backfield every play. So guys like Will Friend, but I think both guys, Will Friend and Tracy Rocker have been maligned at times. But they both of their units have kind of spurred this galvanization or whatever you want to call it, to at least put Tennessee now in a position where you look at the rest of their slate and you say, yeah, they could lose a lot of those games, but they absolutely could win pretty much every single one of them.
Yeah, it's really interesting because they're going to be, kind of equal to a lot of these teams that they're playing down the stretch if they can get healthy. I don't think any of us sitting here believe Brian Maurer is going to be available on Saturday. Now it's Tuesday. Who knows? Concussion protocol, whatever. It's hard to imagine 2 concussions in 8 days that he clears protocol and would be back on the field. Let's assume for now that he's not. What can Tennessee get out of Jerry Garantano? What can you try to get out of him, considering how the first month of the season went for him to the point he was benched, and considering how things went for him Saturday night in Tuscaloosa, particularly with the 4th and goal play?
I mean, that's the $1 million question. And I have no answer because we're mentally. I can't imagine that he's even with us right now. If you watched him in his mannerisms on the sideline, I just sat down there the last 3-4 minutes of the game on the sideline. I just watched JG, and he kept talking to Pruitt, and you could tell he was he had this look on his face like, I really messed up. He was just despondent to a degree, and I don't mentally. I just don't know if they may play him Saturday, but I just mentally I got real questions as to whether he can even function. And then the people around him, I'm sure some of those players really have no faith in this.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing. I think. I'm not saying that Maurer's the only reason you've seen this team get some pep in their step, but I think it's a big reason. Just his confidence, his swagger, and I don't think JG brings any of that right now. And if he plays, can you imagine how vanilla that game plan is going to be?
Well, let me ask you this. What's your other option? No offense to JT Shrout, but I think nobody, in talking to people, now I've not seen JT Shrout scrimmage. I'll be the first to acknowledge that. I've not seen him in 11-on-11 work on the practice field, but you talk to enough people, and it was preseason, it was Jared, it was Maurer, and then Shrout was on down the line is the way it was. And it's continued to feel that way. So, Jesse, my question is, do you have any other option other than Jared if Brian Maurer can't go on Saturday?
Well, I threw this out on the board in one of the questions in my review piece about, because the concern with Shrout is that it's just operationally, they don't think he can get the offense even functioning on a play-by-play basis in terms of getting guys lined up, getting the snap off, before the play clock expires. They had to delay a game in 3 plays, on Saturday with him out there. Now he showed his arm by throwing that, rocket on a 40-yard palm. That was a nice, but if you can't get the snap off, that doesn't really matter. So the question is, do they do some gimmick stuff? Would Juwan or Tim Jordan back there as the Wildcat kind of quarterback? And can you do that for 4 quarters? And the staff is going to have to decide, does that give them the best chance of win against a South Carolina team that, as Rob and I kind of discussed on the way home on Sunday from Alabama, Will Muschamp has no problem getting into a rock fight. He load up as many rocks as you got, and he says, "I'm let's build a house." Like, I mean, he's fine with that.
Yeah, he loves the 13-10 game as much as anybody.
So Tennessee has to decide: does the shrinking the more? Now I know the Vols are a slight underdog here, but it does, I think, change their margin of error if they literally just decide, hey, we're going to mostly take the football or take the air out of the football, when many would agree that Juwan and Callaway and the receivers are probably the best unit on the team. So it's going to be an interesting dilemma.
Because the counter to that, I mean, some would say if it's Jared or if it's Wildcat, it's obviously what you're going to do. If it's Jared, how do you not do anything other than some little short dumps here and there, but play it like you did the second half against Mississippi State? Because for the 4th and goal play, which was obviously just a disastrous play, total miscommunication all across. I think we all acknowledge that. Changing the play, going rogue, whatever you want to say. That was
calamity.
That was a horrific play. He also missed a wide open touchdown to Juwan Jennings. That was just kind of a throw it out there punt type deal. I mean, he was as open as you're going to get.
Beautifully executed.
Yeah, it was a great play call, well designed deal
by everybody except Jared.
You know, he had a Austin's favorite rail route or wheel route to Tim Jordan.
Always open.
That if he hits it to him early, he leaves Tim 1-on-1 with the safety, coming downhill. So it's not like they haven't designed. It's not like you're trying to ask him to throw it into tight windows. His biggest issue, and the reason he lost the job, in my opinion, he couldn't hit wide open people, and he couldn't hit them again on Saturday night. So how do you game plan with a guy that you're not sure can hit the open guy? And you know what I'm saying. But you don't have. But he's your best option on your roster. I think that's why Jim Chaney makes $1.5 million. It'll be fascinating to see what this plan looks like as the week evolves.
Yeah, I mean, as we sit here on Tuesday, I still think that what gives Tennessee the best chance, if you were talking about in terms of variance, if you played the game 10 times, what would give Tennessee the best chance is taking the plan they had in the second half against Mississippi State, where you do mostly take the air out of the football, but you at least have some of those RPO options, that it's very simple, short stuff, and you don't let Juwan get the hell beat out of him, which I think is a big factor. If he plays quarterback on Saturday against South Carolina, how many times is Kinlaw just going to sit on them? And then what are the repercussions for that the rest of the season? Because if we're talking about Tennessee wanting to get to a bowl game, they need to win Saturday, but then they also have to win some other games down the road, which you're going to be counting on Juwan. I just think I just
don't think it's realistic that you can line up Juwan Jennings and say, be my quarterback. Now, look, I think if you
so then we're in agreement then.
Right. I mean,
we're in agreement.
Yeah, no, I'm in agreement with you. I also don't know that you can be real open in a plan. I think what you're saying, and I agree with the second half of the Mississippi State plan, is how you have to play this game. Now, do I play Juwan Jennings in a Wildcat? Absolutely.
Sure.
Do I let him throw it out of the Wildcat? Would not be opposed to it in the bit at all. But for him to play 50, 60 snaps at quarterback, I think is unrealistic.
Yeah, but also, and I think another thing, I mean, to Jesse's point about Jarrett being under center is, I mean, I thought Jeremy went out of his way today to make sure that, I mean, he had to say it, don't get me wrong, but, I mean, he didn't throw him under the bus.
He quadrupled down.
He did. I mean, he's still got faith in him, still
haven't
believe in
wavered
him.
on him.
And, I mean, to me, if you read between the lines, that tells you that, that may be his best option on Saturday. And as much as he may not like it, he knows it.
Well, and I think it started, Austin, I think that started post-game at the podium in Tuscaloosa, because he said he did good things. He pointed out that he did some good things, and I thought that was I'm going to pump my brakes here because I may have to play with this guy for a week or 2 weeks or who knows.
It's knowing that you got to hold your nose a little bit.
Yeah,
it may stink, but you got to hold your nose.
Yeah, you just got to get through it, and obviously they don't have a lot of faith in JT. The problem is, man, I mean, you talk about he implored the crowd on Monday. It's been great all year. We expect it to be great again Saturday at 4.
They run two out there. There's going to be some loud
when
boos.
they announced this, if I was game day ops, I wouldn't do starting lineup Saturday. Because, I mean, like, if they announce 2 as the starting quarterback Saturday, that place will come unglued.
I mean,
but even if they don't, when he trots out there, it's going to come unglued. But the reality is,
the offense is going to be having to tell the crowd. You're going to have Trey Smith doing the angels in the outfield hand wave down.
But Rob, I mean, look, you got the guy's making $3.8 million to decide who's the best guy. I mean, as a fan base, you got to roll. I mean, you may have to roll with that because that's what he's going to do.
Trust me, I've got a 17-year-old who's going to be wearing checkerboard overalls on Saturday. I understand where every fan.
Trust me, I got all the text in the fourth quarter Saturday night while I was working.
I get where every fan's head is at. Jeremy Pruitt. I feel like his comments today, you're exactly right. He may not like it, but he knows that might give him the best chance to win.
It will be a fascinating, and this is, we can move. The fan base certainly, and I wrote about this in my review piece. College football is weird sometimes. Tennessee loses by 22. You just see it. That's 3 touchdowns, whatever. And yet the fan base has probably never been more galvanized behind a guy than they have since he got hired. And yet, if Jarrett goes out there and screws up again, how quickly do you lose that? Yeah, it's
how many times have
fascinating.
have we seen the phrase "die on that hill" on the GQ the last couple of days? I mean, like, you really feel like Jeremy could die on that hill with JG, because what are the fans going to say when he don't play Stroud? Well, this is the same guy that didn't think Maurer was the good enough to start, and Maurer's been the best quarterback Tennessee's got. So why not give Stroud a go? That's where the fans mentally, sure, I think, will counter back to, well, JG's the best option. I was asked about it Saturday in the chat after the game. How can this staff watch JG every day in practice and think he's the best guy? Start of fall camp. I said, same way Tiger Woods goes to the range and they know him, he's known as Ranger Rick, and he hits his driver just straight as a string, and then he goes to the course and it's right and it's left and it's right and it's left, because there's no repercussions on the driving range. You're not keeping score. There's really no repercussions on the practice. You're not really keeping score on the practice.
How many times wouldn't you like to have a dollar for every time Jeremy said Jarrett's practiced really well? I think
he wasn't just making that up.
No,
Jeremy Pruitt wants to win football games. Well, he's going to play whoever he thinks can win.
You're exactly right, Rob. I think that, and I think you would find some people who would say, when you watch the tape, if you brought a scout in to sit down and watch the tape of practice last week, who was the best quarterback, there would be some people who would say it was Jarrett, because we were out there in individual periods. There was Jim Chaney screaming at Brian Maurer because the rep in the individual period in the mesh drill was supposed to go left, and he ran it right multiple times. So that's part of where that comes from, and I think it is going to be You're right. College football fans are fascinating, and it's not a knock on any Tennessee fan in any way, shape, or form. It's the passion in college football is unmatched anywhere else. You lose by 22 points, Jesse, and Pruitt is suddenly now the most pro Tennessee he's ever been.
Yeah, the Bama boy is suddenly bleeding orange.
He's fighting hard against his Alabama. He's defending the orange against Alabama. Whereas some people were saying earlier in the week they were mad because he was giving them too much praise, too much gushing over Alabama, his form. It's just it's funny, the emotions that swing with this. Go ahead.
I just want to say before we move on, I want to know if anybody saw it before we move on from number 2. My favorite tweet of the weekend was some poor bitter Vol fan Saturday night said, "The only winner tonight is Arian Foster, who is no longer the least popular Tennessee player in history." My favorite tweet of the weekend.
I'm sure he was probably not alone in that vibe or
and I'd give you credit, but I can't remember who it was.
All right, let's talk a little bit about the officiating element of it. Now, we're not going to break down every play that the officials missed and all that stuff, but I thought Jeremy Pruitt's comments on Monday were pretty interesting. A bit certainly calculating in how he said he went out and made it clear some calls he disagreed with. Made it clear that he was wrong on a couple things after talking to league officials on Sunday. But I thought the biggest takeaway was, Rob, he has the same takeaway not Tennessee fans, but all SEC fans, college football fans, particularly SEC fans, have in regards to officiating, the accountability or lack thereof. I thought that was an interesting interesting way of criticizing the officials, but more criticizing the process with the officials.
And I think there's groundswell for it, not just in the SEC, but you go back to the NFL last Monday night. Green Bay wins a game they shouldn't have won because of 2 just egregious, phantom calls when you go back and look at it on tape. And that's been a theme from. I heard Peter King talking about it on his podcast. It was like his main theme. I mean, no accountability for officials, and it's the same thing in college football. And I don't know what you can do to fix it, but the fact that they never have to answer a question, I mean, with all the technology that we have right now, I don't know that there's not something that could be done.
Well, I mean, but what? It's not just as much them answering a question. I think some people want. They want punishment. Like,
sure.
Is that group bump? Are they graded? Are they bumped down? They don't get as important of a game, Jesse, or they get suspended. I mean, you had the basketball official last year that had the Facebook stuff.
We've not seen him since.
He just disappeared. The league never said where he went. You know, he's in
Chile. He's in Chile.
He's in Chile. He went into exile somewhere. But what do you do if you're the league
Whip
office?
pro, baby, whip pro.
And he's hanging out with Cajun and
if you're
Alex.
If you're Steve Shaw. How do you? I mean, because they came up with this.
The best thing about
they
Steve
were
Shaw
going
is
to do
every
the
time
Twitter deal, and that just never.
No, and the best thing about Steve Shaw, it doesn't matter if it's Jeremy, Will, because Will had obviously South Carolina had plenty of reasons to be mad on Saturday as well. The best thing is that everyone always is like, love Steve Shaw, great guy. And then
because they don't want it to get worse.
With just a giant butt, with just the biggest butt caveat coming after that. And I did think that was probably one of the better answers Jeremy's given to a question since he's come to Tennessee. I mean, he was able to kind of circle and hit all parts. You know, the SEC, their job's hard. I was wrong. You know, I saw some things on the sidelines that I complained about that upon review I was wrong about, and yet there was also 3 or 4 things that were just egregiously bad. He noted the Darrell Taylor one. Obviously, that one blew up on Twitter. The hold against Wanye, there was no hold. You could certainly make a case for Tim Jordan, but as Jeremy said, there's holding on every play. Where's the accountability of why you called that, but maybe not some other ones? To me, the craziest one was just them stopping it in the middle of before, you know, when Tennessee, and that's the case again. I give Tennessee staff credit there. That's an example of Tennessee staff would have not done that, I think, even a month ago. With where I think there's been some we talk about cohesion on the offensive line and all that. The staff now, Jarrett gets his helmet knocked off. He has to leave the game. No panic. Tennessee has a play call. All right, we're going to run Wildcat. We're down in the red zone. Tennessee gets lined up, and it's Alabama that's confused,
right?
And the officials stop it, just inexplicably. But yeah, that was just an aside.
But
no,
it's a good point.
I just want to give credit to the staff. South Carolina, Georgia State, BYU. Yeah, there wasn't this timeout or everyone looking around, whatever. I mean, like the staff had a plan. It was go. All right, this is what happened. Go. And we don't see that a month ago, in my opinion. But that was obviously just an inexplicable call. But Jeremy's kind of response, circling back to it's hard, but where is the accountability? Where are the repercussions? That's something that everyone's asking. The Twitter thing, like as you mentioned, that died immediately. Never even tried to climb up the hill. Never even got off the ground. My guess is this is going to be a huge discussion again heading into the off season. And perhaps the league does make some sort of decision, you know, when we convene for media days next summer, because it's getting too bad. And it's not even just people talking about like the Bama bias or whatever, because it's multiple teams and multiple, you know, SEC towns on Saturday were just completely livid by just calls that made absolutely no sense.
Is it that it's gotten worse because the speed of the game's gotten better? It's gotten harder to officiate with all the sophistication stuff. Or has it gotten worse from a technology standpoint that we have 97 different angles of everything that took place? Or is it a combination of both?
Okay. It's both. I don't think the officiating is as good, and the advanced look at everything does.
I think HD and 23 cameras at every game.
Yeah, man. I mean, like it's rare that you have like not enough cameras. Like, you know, it's rare that you have a play where you go, we didn't have a good look at that.
Yeah,
you know,
have a good angle.
You know, I'll say this, you know, the old Phil Jackson, you know, when Jordan wouldn't get the calls and Phil would complain, and the next week or the next game Jordan got the calls. Yeah. How's it going to go Saturday? Because Muschamp and Pruitt have been calling all since Sunday, you know.
I don't know that I want to be that officiating crew on Saturday.
Can you imagine?
You know, that's going to be a rough crew to work Saturday afternoon.
The biggest thing that these coaches really want, and I think, you know, Jeremy, this wasn't a play that like Jeremy pointed out, but in talking, I mean, like.
It's consistency.
Yeah, it's just, you know, but Alabama got flagged a bunch of times too. Mm-hmm. I mean, they probably had some reasons to be mad on some calls against them, but Hubert Owen's crew in that game was being very ticky-tack, specifically on pass interference, for example. Both sides got flagged multiple times. And yet then Jawan gets mugged in the end zone, and there's no and that's just it doesn't add up, and it just made no sense. And so I think there was some similar frustrations with Jeremy that he did air publicly on Monday with kind of the holding call down the goal line. That, Tennessee probably got away with some holds earlier near the goal line, and Alabama did too, but they weren't, what? So why was that particular? What was so egregious about what Tim Jordan hooked them there that you would call it? And I think that's where the frustration really comes through.
Well, then you come up with, the personal foul penalty against Darrell Taylor, nobody ever calls that. Guys push off the other guy's body, getting off of.
You talk about SEC fan bases uniting against Alabama. That was one of the funnier things when we were leaving the stadium, and there was Georgia fans, Florida fans, LSU fans, literally doing videos from the last 2 years of Alabama players doing exactly what Darrell Taylor did for no flag. Right. Or worse, but specifically just in huge games.
Well, but that's never called.
It was hilarious.
That's 4th and 10.
And they never
from the 24.
Right. They never call. They rarely do they call anybody illegally downfield, as Pruitt mentioned on Monday, an RPO game. You can watch anybody that throws RPO.
Which we talked about that a week or two ago on the podcast. A week or two.
And you can see it in the screen. You can see it in the screenplay.
You see it everywhere. But the other thing too is the peel back block, and that went in Tennessee's favor and went against Alabama. Nobody calls that either, And so I think there's the thing that drives officials, or drives coaches certainly crazy. Moving forward for sure.
And you're talking about a Tennessee team that's averaging 5 penalties a game, going into that one.
Yeah, and got flagged 18 times for sure. All right, so plenty more to talk about with not the Alabama game, but the South Carolina game. We'll have a better idea, hopefully, as we get later in the week as to what this game plan is going to look like and what Tennessee can do or what they can't do from there. I will close it out with this, and let me ask you this. Does Jeremy Pruitt have to be mindful with his team more this week physically, because they're through 3 physical games? They played a late game against Alabama to the point he didn't practice on Sunday. Are you more concerned about the mentality that you can't put stuff behind you from Saturday because everybody's going to ask you for multiple days or tell you for multiple days how big of a screw job you got because they called this flag, that flag? Does he have to be mindful of that, or do I make too much out of that? Do you think kids just are resilient, they move on, not thinking twice about what happened necessarily with the officiating in the Alabama game? It's more the physical side you got to be worried about.
I go with the physical side. I think that's real at this point in the season, where you just get worn
when
down.
You don't have the depth they
mentally,
have.
Man, I think the guys are probably probably in a better spot than they had been all year. I'm sure they're down, but I would think that it's flipping on the tape on Monday and seeing how you get just jobbed by the officials and your backup quarterback made one of the most egregious plays in history, and you're right there with 8 minutes to go in the game against the number 1 team in the country on the road. I think they got a lot to build on, a lot to feel good about.
But it's more the fact that Juwan Jennings is playing punt coverage in the fourth
quarter.
Totally.
I think once you get to this point in the SEC season, I think it's a grind. Because you've got a lot of big, strong, fast kids that are just banging each other every week, and I think that I really think that adds up.
South Carolina, Jesse's coming off 2 physical games. Is there a whole lot different from a physicality standpoint?
Yeah, I think both of these teams are in similar positions. South Carolina probably has a little bit better depth up front than Tennessee on the defensive line. But their quarterback's banged up, too. They're down to their second and possibly third string. I think Holinski's going to still be able to go, but he's battling a knee. So these are kind of mirror teams right now, and I think that's what's going to make Saturday such kind of a slobber knocker, and it's going to be ugly. But it should be a good game.
All right, let's flip it to recruiting right quick. We got movement with the Memphis Whitehaven trio in terms of a decommit, and then we've got the emoji of silence. We're not going to talk to anybody. Austin,
respect my decision, AP.
Where are we at with that? Where are we at with that one right now?
Well, obviously that's to me the outlier of the 3 was Martavis French. For him to decommit from Arkansas, I thought that was a huge sign that Tennessee's going to hit on all 3 of these kids. When do they do it? I continue to be told that specifically Bryson wants to do the whole hat on the table thing. We'll see if it gets to that point. I know Tennessee could, a nice, well-timed commitment could go a long way, or commitments could go a long way for them right now. So, Tennessee, I think, is going to be the destination for those guys. That's not a surprise to anyone. But like I said, French, he was the one that you weren't sure on. I felt like Tennessee was in a great spot with McDonald, and of course Bryson, as well as his family really, really, really likes Knoxville.
Yeah, and then when you look at Hardy and Tyler Barron, everybody keeps wondering and waiting. And sounds like more visits, and not in a hurry for either one of those guys.
Well, I think Hardy's going to visit, Auburn, potentially Florida. I still think Tennessee's in a really good shape there. I just think some of these kids like the whole song and dance and the allure of recruiting. With Tyler Barron, I think Ohio State is not a factor. I do think Kentucky's more of a factor than they were, considering that they didn't even offer him until a month and a half, 2 months ago. They've done a really nice job there with Tyler, but I don't think Ohio State's a factor. I still think it's Tennessee. We'll still be shocked if it's not Tennessee, but I do think it's more Tennessee, Kentucky than it is anything else at this point.
Yeah, and that's one guy we've been talking about potential dates for forever.
His birthday's tomorrow,
right?
Or today. Sorry.
But the plan or the thought was initially that he might do it on his birthday.
Well, that was his plan, and I think it's adjusted off of that.
Right, and so the waiting game continues there with that. We'll see what Tennessee ends up with this weekend in terms of visitors on campus as well, with a 4 o'clock start, chance to get some guys on campus. Who comes in, who's not here, what's that going to look like? I think it's going to be interesting, don't you?
Yeah, no doubt. I think you want to get Keyshawn Lawrence back up here, but the double-edged sword of that is you're playing South Carolina, a team that's obviously trying to get him to flip to their side. He comes off that official visit to Oklahoma, official visit that his parents went on. I would be shocked if he went to Oklahoma. I just think that South Carolina, his relationship with Will and T-Rob is greater than it is with the Oklahoma staff. So if he's going to move on from Tennessee, and I don't think that happens, but if he's going to do it, to me, South Carolina makes the most sense because they're losing corners, they're losing safeties. By the time he gets to campus, J.C. Horn is a junior. There's probably a better spot there for him at South Carolina than there is Oklahoma if he's going to
flip.
Yeah.
Well, the reality is Tennessee needs wins starting on Saturday, and recruiting would be a big win for Tennessee from a recruiting standpoint.
Maury Thomas and coming in on official visits though, so that'll be big.
Yeah, that's right.
So you got Big O coming in for an official.
And the Hall kid, was it?
The big kid from Texas.
Yeah. The offensive lineman that they recently offered from Texas are going to be in as well. So a couple of recruiting, that's big for Omari Thomas. That was huge, and Tennessee needs to have a big weekend for him. So we'll.
And the Whitehaven trio, if they land, if the dominoes there go how we expect, that only helps Tennessee with Big O.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay. So we'll see how that plays out this weekend in terms of who all shows up. Much more on recruiting coming up in the Friday podcast, so we get a better idea of exactly who will be here, who won't be there, and that type of thing. But that's going to do it for this edition of the Volquest.com podcast. For Jesse Simonton, Rob Lewis, and Austin Price, I'm Brent Hubbs. Thanks for joining us. Have a great rest of your Tuesday, everybody.